People frequently ask me how to communicate with an introvert. If you've ever had a colleague, a friend, or a family member who is kind of on the introverted side, and you've wondered what is the best way to communicate with them, well, today is your lucky day. In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 easy steps to adjust your communication style so that you maximize the chance of having an effective communication with an introvert. So if you stick around, you'll also hear the embarrassing true story of how me failing to follow my own advice left my best friend from high school roaming the streets of Montreal on a vacation we took there many years ago. But more on that embarrassing story later. For now, let's talk about 3 steps for how to adjust and succeed in your communications with an introvert. First, monitor your tone and cadence. So part of your goal in communicating with someone who is more introverted is to make it as comfortable as possible for them to participate actively and stay engaged. At times, the best way to do this is to match your tone and cadence to theirs. This kind of mirroring can be said to apply to all communication. But when communicating with an introvert, it could be especially important. If your tendency is to speak quickly or in a loud voice, this might be just the kind of behavior that actually causes an introvert to become even quieter.
You're awful quiet. Everything okay?
So, working to match your style to theirs will help you be more self-reflective and helps them see the benefit of engaging with you. Secondly, negotiate the time and space for important conversations. So I am not an introvert, but there are times when I have a more introverted disposition, especially maybe when I come home from work after a long day. I could experience myself as being kind of introverted, as wanting to get away from other people. So years ago, I had a housemate whose social life, shall we say, was relatively limited outside of the times he and I hung out together. And there would be these nights when I would come home after a long day of work and frankly just needed some alone time. But this housemate of mine, somehow, the second I walked in, would manage to follow me into my room, literally sit at the edge of my bed as I was changing out of my work clothes into something more comfortable. And even someone who is more extroverted, would find this behavior really hard to take. And what was sad about this, from my perspective, is all things being equal, I actually would really like to hang out with him. But this little behavior, this tick of as soon as I came in, him trying to engage with me, when actually I needed a little bit of time and space, actually was enervating, meaning it took even more energy out of me. And so the advice here, right, is if you're engaging with someone, if you're trying to communicate with someone who tends to need their own space, who tends to be a bit more quiet, giving them that space and negotiating with them or communicating with them, asking them when would be a good time for us to talk about X, Y, or Z, or I'd really like to spend time with you, or I'd really like to have this conversation with you, but I want to do it on your terms at a time that works for you, in a location, and in a way that will actually engage you when you have some energy, can be really helpful. Okay, the third important tip. Lean into pauses and embrace silence. So when you are in communication with someone who's more introverted, chances are there's going to be more quiet moments and more pauses. What that means on your end, and particularly if you are extroverted, particularly if you're someone for whom being quiet means something is wrong, is you need to really practice leaning into that dead space. Not feeling so anxious that you fill it up. Because as you fill up the space, they're probably getting more anxious. So for example, if you ask an open-ended question, resist the urge to answer it. And resist the urge, if they're silent, to turn your very good open-ended question into a closed question or a yes or no question. Because if they're an introvert and you ask a yes or no question, you're going to actually limit the conversation. So sitting through this silence sometimes can yield very surprising and very positive results. So all of this leads to this dreaded story of a weekend trip I made to Montreal with one of my closest friends from high school right after we both got driver's licenses. So the trip for both of us was super exciting. We were like two New Jersey boys going to take a trip across the border, driving our own car. Unfortunately, it didn't go as planned, because as we drove to Montreal on the long ride, somehow we started to have a series of disagreements on like every possible issue in our friendship. To be honest, I don't remember much about the specifics of the disagreements, but here's what I do remember. I remember that our disagreements continued into the night, and then they continued into the late night. And what I remember is that over and over, my friend would just beg me to stop and let things go. He would be like,
"Can't we discuss this in the morning? Can't we have fun?"
but no, this was not okay with me. I insisted, we have to resolve all of this before we go to sleep. Our friendship can't be okay unless we've agreed on all the terms. And you know what happened next?
Oh my God, what happened?
My friend gets out of the bed, he was sitting next to me, puts on his shirt and sweats, and literally leaves the hotel room. He decided that it was better to aimlessly walk the streets of Montreal all night rather than deal with me and my insistence that we resolve our differences right there and then. Now, needless to say, I could have taken some of my own advice on difficult conversations and some of my own advice on that I'm giving you here, right, on how to deal with an introvert. So the point here is that by not respecting his autonomy and his somewhat more introverted approach, what I really did was I blew up the possibility of good communication. I sent my friends into the streets of an unknown city and frankly ruined the first day of our trip.
And whose fault do you think that is?
Now, good news is that we ultimately patched up. We continue to be friends to this day, but with a little bit more care and consideration with respect to my style and how it was different from his, we could have had a really different outcome. So if you're trying to improve your communication with introverts, remember these 3 tips. Always monitor your tone and cadence. Negotiate the time and space for the conversation, and then lean into the discomfort of pauses and silence. Don't just fill up the space. So if you want to keep on learning about communication with introverts, watch What Happens If You Don't Agree in a Mediation. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'm Bob Bordone. Thanks for watching, and let's keep negotiating together. Okay, don't go anywhere. Watch the next video.